everyone. Welcome back to Punch Drunk Critics. I'm Cortland Jacoby, and today I have actress, activist, podcaster, and TikToker Abby Morris from the More Than Tracy Turnblad podcast. You may remember Abby from her appearance on the show last year, where we talked about Queen Charlotte. Abby, thanks for coming back.
Thanks for having me again.
Last time she was here, we coined the term the BCU, the Bridgerton Cinematic Universe. Today, we will be talking about another installment of Shonda Rhimes' hit period drama, Bridgerton Season 3. This time, we are following the third Bridgerton brother, Colin, who ended Season 2 declaring he would never court his neighbor and friend, Penelope Featherington. She is devastated by this and by the fact that her best friend, Eloise, has discovered her secret that she is the gossip columnist, Lady Whistledown. Swearing off the Bridgerton siblings, she goes to the country to regroup for the fall, and then now she comes back ready to find a husband and to start anew. There's a lot going on this season, which I'm sure we will talk about, but Colin's love story kind of drives the action this year. Abby,
Yes.
at the beginning of Bridgerton Season 3, we kind of have these two characters on opposite sides of starting at two very, very different points. Talk to me about how you felt about Colin coming back this year and sort of his attitude this season.
Colin is, well, very clueless about how much Penelope was hurt by his declaration. Because he is apparently incredibly dense, has no idea she's in love with him, which is hilarious. Um, but he comes back having had this summer in Europe where he's had some seemingly very interesting experiences, which Penelope gets to read a little bit about in his journal. Seems like mainly he just had a lot of sex, but he's really giving I'm a changed man. And he's had this glow up, he's got a new hairstyle, he's got abs now. Um, and everybody's noticing and all the girls want him. And meanwhile, Penelope has rejoined society after her family's got money back, but she starts the season in a bad state
Yeah.
because she's had this falling out with Eloise. She knows Colin will never love her, which I feel like she's sort of known this entire time, but hearing him say it out loud to other people was a big blow to her. And so she's just feeling pretty hopeless, but she has a sort of watershed moment where she decides she's gonna change her look. And that's kind
Change
of
your
where we
look,
begin.
change your life, right?
Yeah.
What I kind of love about Colin coming back from this trip, he, between seasons 1 and 2, went on a trip to Cyprus and to Greece. And he comes back, and I feel like there are two kinds of kids who study abroad. The first kid is the kind that won't shut the fuck up about it.
Yeah.
And then there's the second kind who clearly paraded around whatever country they were in and had a bunch of sex and partied the entire time, but they're being really annoyingly coy about it.
Yes.
Colin is both of those. This season
Correct.
is very much the second one, coming back, being like, I did all of these things, but I'm not going to talk about it, but I'm going to write it in my journal. Which we'll talk about this a little bit more. There is kind of a cool thing at the beginning of episode 1 where he's with his brothers and he's not saying, how many cities he's been to. He's like, oh, I can't keep count. But the end of season 1 or episode 1, he specifically knows to tell Penelope, which I think is a really cool little arc and even just an episode. But for you, let's talk about how the costumes kind of reflect where they are at that first part of the season. So we've talked a little bit before, but Penelope's costuming is very, very specific.
Yeah, for sure. She starts out in these big floral gowns. They're very fluffy. They also, I noticed they add a lot of volume on the waist.
Yes.
Which makes her look both bigger and younger.
Yes.
And she's in all these bright yellow colors, which we're told over and over is not her color, which I was like, I don't think it's that not her color. And then she changed the color and I was like, oh yeah, no, that was not her color. And I noticed that her makeup and her hair also changed a lot. I think her hair was already starting to change before the makeover episode, but it feels like I literally saw a TikTok about this, so I'm quoting the TikTok, but instead of putting like volume around the crown of her head, they've sort of curled it into her face and framed her face.
Yeah,
And then her makeup is much more contoured and it makes her just look a lot more mature and sophisticated.
definitely.
And you really see that in the episode where she kind of has her makeover debut at this ball and she's walking down the stairs. And then following that, like the whole season, I really noticed her makeup and like how they were able to draw her features out so much just with makeup. And she looks so pretty. And based on that, like you really do believe like, oh, it's true. It's possible that somebody could see her before and after and feel like, oh shit, this girl's hot, you know?
Yeah, yeah. And there's a specific emphasis on her lips this season. And I
Mm-hmm.
love
Mm-hmm.
how they kind of highlight that feature of
Oh,
actress Nicola Coughlan. She's got such beautiful lips. And so they
yeah.
really highlight and exaggerate it this season. And it works so, so, so well. Um,
Yeah.
on the other hand, too, you have Colin, who obviously like comes back a little bit more cocky, a little bit, I want to blah, blah.
Yeah.
But he also physically has visually has a transformation as well. Like his brothers call him sturdy, meaning he bulked up and he lost baby fat. um for you, did that work?
I mean, it's like if he was gonna look different, I'm glad they acknowledged it instead of
Right,
just letting it be a thing where it's like, well, of course he had to glow up to be the
right.
lead of Bridgerton. Like, I'm glad they sort of, make fun of him for it. And I do wonder like why he had the transformation, if it's the thing where they're like,
Yeah,
well, it's your season, you better go get abs.
yeah,
And that kind of makes me feel like, all right. He definitely looks older as well, and it makes him look more
yeah,
worldly. And what they did with his hair also like literally recalls Brewster.
yeah. And the little like, oh, his curls, like there
And his
there's
flop on the top.
flop, and then there's this one particular curl that I was like, oh my God, like I couldn't stop staring at it. I do appreciate that we sort of have like parallel physical transformations, right? Like
Hmm.
it isn't just the female changing, it is also the male changing,
Yeah,
trying to figure out. And it's not for any other person. It's literally because I don't know who I am. I'm insecure in my own body. How do I fix
right.
this?
They
Um,
make it have real meaning instead of just
yes.
being like, well, they have to be better looking to be loved.
Which I appreciate, which I
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
definitely appreciate that. So, Penelope, she sees Colin, she sees Eloise, who is now friends with infamous mean girl, Cressida Cowper,
Mm,
um, and is still very, at this point, she hasn't fully transformed yet. And she sort of brushes Colin off at the ball that you were talking about, where she wears this beautiful dark green gown. Um, she also kind of really tells Colin off. And this sort of starts Colin realizing that, like, oh, this person I care about, I hurt. How do I make
yeah.
this better? And this sort of starts them off on their journey that season of basically Colin trying to teach her how to flirt, how to find a mate, how to find a partner.
Yeah.
We've seen this like in rom-coms throughout. Creator Jess Brano like has talked about how a lot of these romantic comedies were inspiration this season. You've got like your My Fair Ladies, your She's
Mm,
All That, except there's not a bet this season, which thank God. You have all these references in this story. Did sort of the like friend helping another friend out to find love and then falling in love themselves, did that
mhm.
work well for you?
Yes, although it is one of those things where I'm like, that has never happened in real life. I think they did it in a pretty grounded way.
Right.
I mean, maybe it has happened. If it's happened to you, like comment below.
I feel like it
Um,
happened one time and then every writer just ran with it.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's the he's just not that into you
Yes.
classic moment. Yeah. It did really work for me. I think I wasn't expecting it to, and it's pretty different from the book, which I reread in anticipation of this, and I was like, okay, how is it gonna at all stick to the book? And it really mostly didn't, which is fine. And I liked this better. It felt a little bit more of a slow burn than the book because I feel like with the book, the plot I don't want to spoil it if anyone's not read the book, but like the big plot in the book that's outside of the romance all happens along with the romance at the same time.
Yes.
So I kind of like that they separated it, but I also loved the stakes of the carriage moment in the book more.
We will
But
talk about the carriage moment.
I'm sure to it, yeah. But what really does work for me is the kiss in the dark, the first kiss when she's like in her
Okay.
nightgown and he shows up at her door. That one I squealed.
So, okay, so let's talk about that. So at the very, very first ball where she wears the green dress, she meets Lord Debling. Cressida accidentally rips her dress, rips Penelope's dress. Embarrassed, Penelope goes, runs off, and then tells Colin off, and then they make this deal later on the next day. Meanwhile, Lady Whistledown writes this kind of very scathing article, calling Colin out and being like, I see you, dude. You are still this insecure kid. Who are you fooling, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then we have um, this ball again where Penelope and Colin are fully working together, trying to find her husband. She's connecting with people, she's talking with people. And can I just say, I really appreciated there's some background characters this season with various abilities, which I really appreciate. Like
Yes.
Ken flirts with a guy in a wheelchair, which is wonderful. There's a mama who is signing all throughout
Mm-hmm.
um, one of the Queen's presentations. I really appreciate that they are creating a full world of full diversity, which is really cool. There's also like more fat people this season in general too, which I really
Mm-hmm.
appreciated. So at this ball, she's flirting a lot. Eloise finds out previously that Cullen is helping her. She tells Cressida to help her rather loudly. Other people hear. And so it sort of gets out at this ball in the second episode that all of the reasons why Penelope is exceeding and talking to people and really coming out of her comfort zone is because of Colin, which is sort of embarrassing. Um,
Mm.
so let's talk a little bit about that, right? So we have this moment in the garden where she's basically been like, all right, they found out that he's helping me. I'm never going to get anybody now because of,
Yeah.
basically what they did is a huge no-no in terms of societal norms.
Well, it makes sense if
Right.
somebody finds out that you're not doing it on your own, you had somebody in the back helping you, like your success is fake, you know what I mean?
Yeah. But also in relation to like have that close relationship with a member of the opposite sex, especially
Yes, that
if you are
too.
a woman. I mean, that's cause for ruin. So she basically is in tears almost. She's like, I'm never gonna get married. I could die tomorrow. Could you please kiss me so I at least know what that's like? And he was like, yeah, sure, okay, fine. Which is from the book. You mentioned that
Yeah,
this season doesn't really follow the book. I will say that
they kept the major beats.
they kept the major beats, and there is dialogue from the book in every single episode. In episode 1, it's when Portia tells Penelope that she's so excited that Penelope is going to take care of her because she's not getting married, essentially. So,
They basically cut it up and like pasted it back into a new mosaic with other stuff.
which I think worked for me.
Yeah,
I
I
don't
agree.
know if it worked for you, but I think it worked for me. If you're going to tell this new story, let's use similar puzzle pieces, which is cool.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of people were expecting that kiss and then like Colin just to like be completely head over heels and have this huge realization, which is not in the book. Though that is sort of it creeps in on him slowly throughout.
Yeah.
It doesn't do that in the show such as much as he visits brothel next episode. So talk
Mm.
to me a little bit about Colin's sort of sexual journey this season and if that
Oh.
helped you at all.
Interesting. Yeah, clearly this has been Colin's arc in his travels is
Yeah.
that I don't know if he was a virgin before, but that's sort of the vibe he's bringing. He's bringing like college freshmen who like glowed up over the summer, went to college and like slept with a bunch of people, then comes back to his hometown at Thanksgiving and is like, I'm so different now. That's what he's giving. So clearly he's had some kind of sexual awakening abroad. He's had a lot of sexual experiences. And I think it's kind of similar to I mean, I just don't perhaps I have an alternative view of sex, but I think if you're in love with someone, you can still have sex with other people. At least a lot of people can. And that feels like that's kind of what's going on when he visits the brothel. And I also do think it's like it's kind of creeping in on him where he's like,
Yeah,
why can't I stop thinking about her? Like, this is weird. Why am I having these dreams? Like, and I think that's kind of natural too, because I also think that like him going to the brothel after having that dream could be some kind of response to
right.
being like that this is confusing and I'm horny, so like I'm gonna go hire some ladies to have a threesome.
I'm gonna get it where I can, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I think also too that like even to your point, he hasn't even professed his love for Penelope. He doesn't even realize his love for
No.
Penelope. There
Which is
is
the best part
no
of any rom-com, in
right.
my
Like,
opinion.
he's still gonna there I think for people who might have like a stronger view of monogamy, even that him going to a brothel, he hasn't had those feelings, that realization yet. Like he hasn't even gone
Yeah.
there yet. That like, that there is feelings there.
No, it's not. People don't real like have a romantic dream about their friend and then be like,
No.
and I will never have sex with anyone else, especially when he doesn't think she likes him back.
Yeah. Yeah. Or I don't even think he realizes that he even likes her at that point. I think it's
He's
just
just
sort
like,
of
that
like,
was weird.
I think many people have dreams or weird sexual things that happen while they're asleep that like, with people that, they might not think in a sexual context and then they
Right.
like, oh, wow, that was weird. And then they move on. Like that is also, I
Every
think, a very human thing.
every crutch I've ever had, I've like had a dream about them and then
Yeah.
been like, is this or is this not? And then I had to figure it out. But
Yeah.
like
But
sometimes it's the
yeah.
dream that will give you the idea. That's real. There is also a moment where he goes to the brothel and he's like not really into it.
Yes.
And
Yes.
that's later, right?
That is later.
Once he starts to realize it, that makes sense.
And I think that is also a moment of him trying to fight it too, right? Like he sees
Yeah.
that Penelope's success with Lord Debling is really starting to pay off. He knows that Debling would be good for her. He also, I think is still trying to be, I think he might on a subconscious level realize that if he goes to Penelope, he's kind of abandoning this persona that he, created for
Yeah,
himself.
yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
so him going to the brothel is maybe like his way of trying to keep that persona alive a little bit as well.
I think there's a lot of identity crisis and a lot of, I mean, and that was last season too with Anthony to a degree. Like the identity crisis and Kate actually of her being like, I'm a spinster, this is it, and then like being like, oh my God, am I gonna be a wife? Like this is crazy. I think that's like a huge part of a lot of romance plot lines.
Mhm.
And this is Bridgerton, so they're gonna take any opportunity they can to show you sex. So I just feel like, and I feel like if we're gonna judge men for having casual sex in this universe, like there are quite a few men you could apply that to. How are you gonna do with Benedict's season, man? You know,
Well, how are you going to do with Benedict any season that he's in? Like,
literally,
I
yeah.
mean, Benedict's gotten more action than anybody, I think, in the entire series. I mean, he had multiple liaisons in season one. He
Mm,
had that one art school girl last season.
right.
Season he is with Lady Tilly, who is sort of a widow. Let's talk about Benedict for a little bit, who is perceived to possibly be the center of the fourth season, so next season.
Hope
Um,
so. Oh, I actually loved Benedict's book, which I think is kind of an unpopular opinion, but I really
mhm,
connected with Sophie. I think it's gonna be really cool to see their love story develop. And I know he like teased that he has an important dance this season, so we were like, oh my God, there's a scene at this masked ball where Sophie shows up. I don't know if this happens, by the way, in the episodes I haven't seen, so I might eat my words in a few weeks, but um yeah, so I was like, oh my God, he's gonna finally meet this woman and like spend all season pining after her. And so far, he's just sleeping with another rando. And I don't care what he does with his body, but I just I just was so ready to have his love story like teased and drawn out because I think that's a huge part of what's making Colin and Penelope work so well is that we had seasons leading up to them. We know them both. We are invested in them. And yeah, I just really wanted that from Benedict as well, because I actually really love the actor. I think he's super charismatic.
Yeah.
I think he's the best looking Bridgerton brother, hot take. And I really think he's gonna do great in his season. I'm like super excited about it. And I really loved the character in the book. I just wish they had him be a little less all over the place with his arc. And I think he's kind of like trying to find fulfillment or whatever, but it's like it feels just very floundery and that they're just sort of giving him filler plots.
So before we go any further, I feel like we should mention you have seen the first 4 episodes. I've seen the first
Mhm.
6 episodes. So I don't know if I forget where this detail falls. At one point, he does talk about how he doesn't have a purpose, which is
Yeah,
so
no,
funny to
that's in the first
me
four.
because the first 2 seasons, he really does focus on his painting. He has more of a purpose than Colin does. So for
Way
them to
more.
just sort of like abandon all of that in order for him to like in order to basically set up his season for next year, that didn't work for me at all. I feel like
Yeah,
literally I feel like they hide Benedict's character behind sex and behind his love of women,
I agree.
and I think it hinders the show. There are multiple plot lines this season, and I feel like Benedict is like the prime example of this, where they felt like, all right, we have this ensemble cast, we're adapting an ensemble show from
Hmm.
a book series where each book is centered on one person, which is a very hard thing to do.
It is, yeah.
And they have all these extra characters that they don't really know what to do with, so they give them these storylines, and I feel like most of them don't work. um, do you agree with that? Which storylines for you didn't work as well?
Don't know yet about most of them not working.
Okay.
That one certainly didn't
From
work for me.
Mhm.
Last season's art school, whatever, didn't super work for me.
It's like they forgot about it.
Shockingly, I actually really liked the whole thing with Will and oh my God, I forgot his wife's name. And them becoming titled. I thought that was actually really interesting, and I liked seeing that sort of tension in because there really are only characters that we follow that are outside society, but I think that is an unpopular opinion. So I didn't mind that one. I just want more Lady Danbury all the time. And I
Yeah.
was really hoping after Queen Charlotte that we would get some more Lady Danbury. And I her brother showed up in the first 4 episodes, but other than that, there hasn't been very much. And I also something that I really loved about Penelope's book is that Lady Danbury is like kind of a mentor to her and like sort of picks her out and is like, "You're all right, kid. Like you're like me. You get it." And
So
I wish there was more of that immediately in the season.
I have a theory about that. I think
Mm,
what's going to happen is I think that Colin and maybe a few other people are going to be the only ones to find out this season that Penelope is Lady Whistledown. I think that
interesting.
I think that next season or in over a couple seasons probably the identity of Lady Whistledown will become more and more and more of a plot line.
Mm.
And I think that Penelope will bond with Lady Danbury more as the Lady Whistledown identity plot becomes more prevalent to the society as a whole rather than individuals.
That's a good idea.
Um, I feel like to add that in right now is maybe too much, but that's my theory there because also canonically, Colin and Penelope, spoiler alert, have a child. Their first child's name is Agatha. So um I think it will happen. It just won't happen with the love story. It will happen with the Lady Whistledown story.
Oh,
That is
okay.
my theory.
I hope they do that. I think that would be a really great way to keep Colin and Penelope relevant
Yeah,
for continuing seasons because they are so
yeah,
clearly like, beloved characters at this point. So like they want to keep them in the story. They want to have them continue to show up in plot lines. That's nice.
yeah.
Because I
That's my theory if they do it correctly.
like Anthony and Kate are still around a little bit.
Well, yeah. So Anthony and Kate show up in the first episode, and then we don't see them for the rest of part one. Um, they are in part two from what I've seen. So
Okay.
I will just say that.
Yeah.
to go back to what you were saying also about Lady Danbury in general and her having more of a storyline, that is also pushed a lot in part two. I will also say that I feel like Queen Charlotte hurt Lady Danbury's story, the Queen's story, and then also Violet's story this season. I felt
Interesting.
like maybe because the writers are like, well, they have their whole own series. I didn't feel like they gave them enough to do, enough weight this season. Granted,
Yeah.
Violet is very much preoccupied with trying to pair off her sixth child, Francesca. Um,
Yeah.
and Lady Danbury is sort of helping her with that. The Queen sort of has the same storyline that she has every year of like, who's whistled down? She's annoying me. Who's whistled down? Who's the diamond of
Right.
the season? You know, after 3 seasons, that kind of starts to sour. Lady Danbury's storyline again just feels very thin to me. I don't necessarily know if Queen Charlotte helped them in the actual series.
Well, I wouldn't blame Queen Charlotte. I would blame those who did not continue and pick it up after Queen Charlotte, because
Yeah.
that would be a really interesting
No, well, that's
between
my point
season.
is I blame the writers
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
for not doing it properly, to be
Yeah. No, I was really excited so far to see Violet have some kind of flirtation with Lady Danbury's brother. I really hope more comes of that, because I think that I've been saying, and I literally said this when I came on this podcast a year
you did.
ago,
You
and
did.
a lot of things have changed. I live in a different country now, but when I was on this podcast a year ago, I said I need Violet to have her romance arc. Where is it? Where is it? Where is it? And I was so glad Queen Charlotte had sort of kind of gotten the ball rolling, or like implied a little something. More is happening with this man like sexily picking up her glove and everything, which was hot. I liked that.
He's
But
really
I
cute.
he really is.
He's
He's
really
like
hot.
he's like maybe the most attractive person on the show this
Yeah.
season to me.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, that and he just has such riz. Like it just kind of he just kind of oozes riz.
He does.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's funny because I think there are two camps with this. I think there is something really beautiful and romantic about the idea of like falling in love with one person and that being your only person and then being content with the time you had with them and, not falling in love again. I think there is something very romantic about that. I also think it's not realistic. And I
No.
think that,
Also, like,
how old is
I'm so
Hyacinth in
sorry.
this? Hyacinth is like going
11
on
or no,
12 or
older, maybe
13.
14. Yeah.
You're telling me that she never fucked someone in that time? Like, you're telling me that
Well,
like,
it's
and but that
Regency.
she
I
expects
believe
that for the
it.
rest of her life?
No, yeah, I agree. I mean, here's the thing, like I've only had one serious partner. If we stayed together and were together for a long time and had children and everything and he died, like I wouldn't
Yeah.
I probably wouldn't be like I'm going to for the rest of my
Yeah.
life never love again. Like maybe you feel like that for a while, but I feel like after, 12, 13, 14 years,
Yeah.
most people are, and I get it because I think their love like looms so large over this entire show and all of their children. But I just want the best for Violet, the love of my life. And I couldn't have picked a better love interest for her than this man,
Yeah.
actually.
Betty White, I think, is the only example I can kind of think of this where, she had a husband who passed away in the 70s or 80s, and she was like, I'm done. Like, I'm gonna
Well,
find
but she
my
was in her
career in
70s or
animals.
80s. What is Violet, like
She
45?
was
Like, come on.
No, she was in her 50s. I mean, she was younger. Like she was in her 50s when Golden Girls came out and he passed away before that. So I mean,
Oh, okay.
she lived like 30, 40 years without her husband.
Wow.
But I mean, that's a rare thing. And I don't think it's, I think romance too, you kind of when you write a romance or create a romance or whatever, you want to say there, you're writing that from a modern perspective. And now
Right.
this idea of moving on, I think, might be a more modern one than a Regency one, but it happens. And so
Right.
I think it does work. I think the way they do it is really works really well. I really like the added fact that it's like, oh, it's Lambert, Lady Danbury's brother. Like, that's great.
Oh my
Um,
God, I gasped when I figured out who he was because I was like, oh my God, not Lady Danbury having fucked her dad, and now she's gonna fuck Lady Danbury's brother.
that was my favorite part about it. It's
The
like, oh, you're gonna
incest.
you're gonna steal my dad. I'm gonna steal your brother.
Well, she didn't know.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm.
Oh, so
No, she
crazy.
I I interpreted the end of season one with the crowns. I mean, the end of Queen
Queen
Charlotte
Charlotte?
when Violet notices the crowns, like
Oh
that lady,
yeah.
like I think she put two and two together of like, oh, my dad and
Oh.
her had a
Oh
thing.
well
I
then that
think,
I don't want that to cheapen her romance with this very sexy man. That
well,
makes me
to
sad.
be fair to the storyline, Violet isn't actively pursuing him. He's more pursuing her, and she's like
Yeah.
into this. It's not like she's
Right,
going
right, right.
after him for like,
She's
revenge.
not, let me get this. Also, she and
Yeah.
Lady Danbury are good at this point.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
she is aware that her mom was a bitch, I think. So
Yes. Speaking of loves of lives and bitchy moms, the love of my life is Portia Featherington.
she's
Let's
a
talk about
queen.
the
She's
Portia of it all.
I'm sorry, you can't make me not like her. She's so cunty.
Is so she's so funny this season as Penelope's mother. Um, I think she brings the actress Polly Walker brings so much dimension to that role. She is funny, she is vicious, she is cruel. You hate her at times, but then other times you're like laughing when she's teaching her elder two children, married children, about how to have sex.
Oh my God, that was so
So
funny.
funny. I think for me, and I
Those
say,
men have not been going to brothels, apparently.
yeah.
I feel like in the Bridgerverse, in the BCU, um,
Yeah.
it's usually pretty accepted that the men are gonna go have some sex before
Yeah.
they settle down with a woman so they can teach their wife the ways of sex, which is like we can talk
Yeah.
about that another
Yeah.
time, but
Yeah.
that is a tenet of the BCU.
Yeah. Not all men.
Apparently not.
Not all men.
Only the leads who are gonna have the sexy sex
Yeah.
scenes.
Yeah. So they
So
can like
yeah.
gently glide, which is an issue within itself, right? Like
Right.
gently
They're like
guide and like,
have you ever heard of
yeah.
your clitoris? Like, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. This might hurt for a minute, but just a minute, Um,
Oh my God, yeah.
let me teach you. Like that's a huge part of
Right.
how
No.
Bridgerton men have sex, except Benedict
No.
in season one, but yes.
Well, yeah, I mean, but that's because he hasn't found the love of his life yet. But when he finds her, you bet
Yes.
your ass he's
True,
gonna
true,
teach her where
true.
her clitoris is. Like, he's
Yeah.
ready. He's been learning. He's been studying up. This is all in service of her, in fact.
He's been painting a lot of French girls up until that point.
Yeah, he's well versed in anatomy.
Well versed. So let's get back to the Portia Featherington of it all. There's this really wonderful scene at the end of episode 4 where Portia, at this point, Colin has like fully realized his feelings. He's trying to persuade Penelope to not accept Lord Debling's proposal. Lord Debling kind of picks up on the feelings that both of them share, that they're not being able to communicate, and just sort of politely tells Penelope, you know what? I'm going to leave for 3 years. I'm going to go explore the world. I need somebody there who I know isn't going to fuck someone else and produce another heir that's not mine. So, you know, gracefully, I
He
hope
doesn't say it
I
like that, but
he
yeah,
doesn't say it like that, but
he
like it's
doesn't
implied,
that in a
right?
nice
Like I
way.
need someone whose feelings lie elsewhere, or I need someone whose feelings doesn't lie elsewhere, right?
Yeah.
Um, it's implied though. And he politely, bows out and says, "Hey, I hope you find what you're looking for. But I'm gone. I'm done." And then Portia kind of comes up and says, "What have you done? What are you doing here?" And Penelope and her sort of have this, I think, really a watershed moment in their relationship of her, Penelope straight out says, "Am I only good for you if I have a ring on my finger? Um,
Yeah.
for you, how did that work?"
Great, because the whole reason that Penelope begins her transformation and decides to get married is because her mother's like, I'm so glad I'm always going to have you to take care of me, which is from the book. And so that was sort of the catalyst. She was being like, oh my God, I'm going to have to wait on my mother and be her like little spinster, uh, you have to just be with her for the rest of my life, taking care of her in her old age. And she's like, I don't want that for me. Like, I don't want her to be the only person I'm around. So it makes a lot of sense that she then sort of gets the confidence to call her mom out, because her mother has made no secret of the fact that she thinks Penelope has no prospects.
Mm-hmm. No
And
secret of,
it's quite mean, which is,
yeah. Well, because she's the one who's like, not only like would make a comment about her, about Penelope's appearance or the fact that she reads all the time or all of these things, right?
Mhm, mhm.
She also encourages and does not stop her siblings from doing the same. And I think that also kind of um hurts for Penelope. It's not just the fact that she's going to have to be taking care of her mother as a spinster. It's also the fact that whichever sister has a child would then be in charge of the household, right?
True.
Then have, not only will her mother be there, but her siblings, one of which who is very dim and one of which is very cruel, would have control over her life and make it more miserable. And I think for her, the transformation is obviously not only a way to get out of that, but to take the control that she had as Whistledown and then fully command her own life. And
Mhm.
for me, I think that the whole the whole Portia aspect of it all, um, it's her being able to say, I mean, this is the first time we've really seen her confront her mother too.
Yeah.
Like, fully confront and actively say, "You're hurting me."
Yeah.
And I think that we don't see much of Portia after that moment, but I think that kind of stops her in her tracks, and it'll be exciting to see where that goes in part two.
Yeah.
And if that changes anything for her. So
Her In the book, her reaction to Colin proposing, I recall being extremely funny. So I'm excited to see that dramatized.
yes, yes. We will talk again for part two. I don't know if that will be on this podcast or your podcast,
It's
but
my podcast.
oh, it's your podcast. We will talk about differences between the book and the show then, because I have a lot of thoughts.
Yeah.
But anyway,
Okay.
um,
Perfect. Perfect.
yes, yes. Um, I want to talk about some of the music this season. For me, some that uh Billie Eilish cover, it's Happily Ever After, right?
Or happier than ever.
There we go. Thank you. Happily than ever. That worked so well for me. That's one of the times where Colin notices that Penelope and Doubling are dancing, and I think that's the moment when he really realizes his feelings. That cover worked really well. Bridgerton is known for their covers. They're known for their score, composed by Chris Bowers. Um, so my question for you is, which covers worked well for you?
I am not the person to ask about this.
Okay,
Because I am the child of two classical musicians, and I don't think the pop songs have enough going on to be interesting in a
fair.
situation like this, and they take me out of it. Sorry, that's my thought. Um,
That's
you
valid.
know, all the love to the musicians and the composer who are working very
Yeah.
hard, and a lot of people like it. It's not my thing, and I'm going to be honest about that.
So you weren't a
Um,
fan of the Pitbull cover in the carriage?
I guess that one bothered me the
It took
least
me out
because
of
it
it.
wasn't.
It was goofy for me. It felt very
Um,
goofy.
I don't know if I was distracted, I'm gonna be honest, by all the rest that was going on. And I think maybe it worked for me because it was like, it's non-diegetic, right? Because
Yeah.
diegetic is when it's in the story. Yeah. So it was non-diegetic, so that was better. But I really notice it when in the background they're playing actual classical music
Mhm.
that's like period appropriate, and then they go into like covering A, B, C, D, E, F,
Right.
U with like violins. I'm sorry.
Well, you
I
you
know I know too much.
you also realize how literally one note our music of today is.
No,
Like,
yeah.
when
Well,
you
that's because it is a
hear,
vocal line. Sorry, I'm getting on a soapbox. It's a vocal line. It is a singer's
yeah,
music. It's not orchestral music, and there's nothing
yeah,
wrong with that. We have music today that is done by singers or bands, and it's not contrapuntal. Like, you know what I
yeah,
mean? So it makes sense that it's not going to be fucking Beethoven. It's Taylor Swift.
no.
And that's fine. That's great. But translating it into that world, juxtaposed with other types of music, to me takes me out of it a little bit, but I am sure I am not in the majority with that
Mhm.
because again, I have grown up surrounded by classical music. My two parents are both classical violinists. My sister's a classical cellist. My whole family,
Yeah.
like my yeah, my I have two harpist aunts, a French horn uncle, many
Wow.
close family friends on many various
Yeah.
instruments, another cellist aunt, um, a cousin who plays a bunch of instruments, but mainly trombone, all professional musicians. So like I'm not
Yeah.
the one to be asking about which is the best pop cover. Sorry. My parents get asked to play a lot of these for weddings. And
Oh, a
there was
lot
this
of
point where
vitamin
all
C.
the millennials were getting married and they all wanted Coldplay. And
Yeah.
my parents started hating Coldplay. And okay, here's a
Oh, yeah. I hate
funny
cold.
anecdote. Because often they will have these arrangements of these musics where it's like a little like do 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 in the background, and then just the melody being like like I don't even know
Yeah,
whatever
like,
song they're doing. Like
yeah.
one time they did Make You Feel My Love, and this is a funny story because when they have to get each sheet music for all the different parts, right? So their friend who was organizing it sent them music, and it said the subject of the email was "Make You Feel My Love" parts. And that is a story we tell my family often.
I love that Make You Feel My Love parts.
I'm too loyal to my
Yeah,
classical musician parents
right.
to say anything else.
I mean, I will kind of push back a little bit against that idea of like when you have these longer dance scenes, which purpose, their purpose is to show longing, to show, wherever they are in the story. In this case, a lot of the time it's jealousy, with Anthony and Kate, it's how much they want to be together. Um, I don't know if those moments would have the same effect with,
Yeah.
the Vivaldi cover that we didn't know very well.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So,
No, no, I totally understand that.
their purpose is there. I
Yeah.
understand,
Yeah.
yeah, the melodic lines of a lot of our pop songs aren't very melodic. So, um, there's some interesting ones this season. You've got A, B, C, D, E, F, fuck you, or F you. You've got Happily Than Ever. You've got
I'd say that one was my favorite, I think.
yeah,
Was Happier Than Ever.
you've got Jealous.
Maybe just because I really like that song.
Yeah. I think, yeah, I also think your favorite cover of Bridgerton depends on like,
You know which one I actually do
yeah,
love from the entire series? I think Wildest Dreams is the one that worked best.
yes, which is ironic because I feel like Taylor Swift doesn't always have, especially on Tortured Poets, doesn't have much of a melody. Like sometimes literally it just feels like she's
Yeah.
playing the same
No,
note over and
well, it's the
over.
arrangement. Like it's a really good
Yeah.
arrangement. That's why.
Arrangement. You also have Dynamite by BTS. You have um Jealous by Nick Jonas. There's some good ones. I feel like sometimes they also have to pick the more obvious pop songs. And this season, like especially for some reason, they just pick those because it's, you know, what everybody would know. I really love in season one, the Strange by Celeste cover. The one that's like, isn't it strange? That one. It was also in Ted Lasso. I don't know if that's ringing a bell.
I'm so sorry. I am not the
Okay.
person to ask
It's okay.
about this.
I really love that cover, and I think it like kind of brought a lot of people to that song in a way. And I think it is one of the more melodic pop songs that have been covered. So I wish there was like one that people didn't know very well that we were all like then flocking to figure out what that was. So but
Interesting.
we'll see.
What's your dream song to be covered on Bridgerton? What do you think would work the best?
Well, it's funny because we've had 3 seasons or two. Well, yeah, I'm gonna say 3 seasons. I'm gonna count Queen Charlotte as a season to think about like what would work for Penelope and Colin. And there's an Michelson song called Sort
Mm,
of that I think would work really well for them when Penelope sort of realizes that like, oh, I can't be with you anymore. Like,
mhm,
the lyrics are like, if I was stronger, I would let you go. If I was stronger, I would leave the show. Um, if I was stronger, I would up and go, but here I am, and here we go again. So sort of this like push and pull thing. I think that would work really well.
mhm.
I honestly, my ideal song for the carriage scene was Take Me to Church, because in the books
That actually would work great,
they
I think, as a Bridgerton
find out in a
arrangement.
church. So that was,
Yes.
yeah, that's what I kind of wanted, was that Hosier. And I think that would be an amazing cover.
That would work really well.
They need to cover some Hosier. Like that's what needs to happen. Anyway, what about you? Is
Totally.
there like a moment that you, or a song for a song that you were like, oh, this would be good for that?
I don't know about a specific moment, but it's interesting to think about like, oh, which songs would work well as this kind of cover. Of course, my first thought is my favorite song in seventh grade, which is All the Right Moves by One Republic, because there's already cello in it.
Yes,
And
yeah,
I feel like that actually does really apply to a lot of
yeah.
the plot lines.
I feel
Um,
like that would work really well this season if we see Colin find out about Lucille Down. I feel like that would be a really interesting cover for that, you know?
yeah, I think that would match the vibe for sure.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah,
excited to see what it is. Yeah.
yeah. So I want to kind of end on some of the more, because I mean we could talk about this all day. We're gonna do a part 2 for part 2, which comes out June 13th, which,
Hmm.
we have less than the month of February to wait, which sucks, but it's not like we're waiting
Yeah.
the month of December, it's February.
It's actually perfect timing for me because
Yeah,
I
you're
have,
in school.
yeah, well, I have two giant essays due a week from the day the Bridgerton part one came out. And
Yeah.
then I have 1 week in between there to decompress, and then my boyfriend's coming. He leaves June 13th. So it's like I have a consolation prize.
Yeah, yeah. Or it'll just make you miss some more.
Oh God, that's also a possibility, but at least it's something to look forward to. Maybe I'll
Absolutely.
make him watch with me before he leaves for the airport.
Right. I feel like body diversity obviously will be talked about more in season 2. We end in, or not season 2, part 2. In
Hmm.
episode, or in part 1, there's so many parts and episodes and seasons. It's
It's
so
confusing.
At the end of episode 4, the end of part 1, we have the carriage scene where Colin like says, basically is like, I'm in love with you. Don't marry that guy. Please, can we be more than friends? And she's like, yeah, like I feel the same way.
Yeah.
They start making out in the carriage. And it doesn't lead to any, well, there is penetration, but it's not traditional penetration, right? Um,
I don't know what you're allowed to say on this podcast. I
Yeah.
feel like we've already pushed it a little
There's a lot
far.
of there's some fingering which is gracefully and tastefully done.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean, I think the word fingering is a bit of a misnomer for like
yeah,
what it sounds so crude,
it
but
does sound more crude.
it doesn't have to be.
There's a lot of hands happening.
We can just say hand stuff.
There's hand stuff. Yeah.
Okay.
Uh,
I don't know
There's a
what
lot of
base that
hand
is even.
hand stuff. When I think of hand stuff though, I think of like people like doing like mime work.
Oh no, I think of
No.
this, but maybe that's my mind in the gutter.
There's a lot of hand stuff in this episode, and we don't get the full, like, I'm sure that there are more sex scenes to come. I'm not saying I have or haven't seen anything, but there could be some more sex scenes to come for you.
Well, we know there will be, obviously.
Who knows? Um
There's a formula to a Bridgerton
yes.
book or series, which
Yes.
is, there's like one point where they do a little bit and get interrupted, and then there's the full
Mhm.
sex, and then there's like usually a scene after that where it's like they're happy having sex, but it's
Yeah,
not as like drawn out.
correct. Yeah.
I
And
have
then
the formula memorized.
yeah, yeah, fair, fair. And then there's that final scene like of the series where like they we leave them as they're about to have sex too.
Classic.
Yeah, yeah. Um, I think we're gonna get more into how Penelope is sexually represented, both as a woman and then also as a fat woman next in the next part. But for part 1, how did that work for you? I keep saying how did that work for you, but for part 1, did you have any thoughts about that?
Well, I know there's been like lots of debate about like can we count her as fat representation because she's so tiny, and like here's the thing, like unfortunately it reads like I've said this
Yeah.
before. I do think it counts. I think it's certainly she's coded in that way. Whether the fact that this really groundbreaking stuff is able to be done with her because she is small and, petite and not that fat is a whole other question. Which,
Right.
we can do a whole other podcast episode on that. But like, the fact is, like, even just the way her weight distributes, I have never seen in a romance lead, really. I've never seen in a sex scene that wasn't supposed to be comedic or tell something or
Yeah.
like cringe or awkward. I don't think I have ever seen a genuinely titillating sex scene with a person who like has somewhat of a double chin, just
Yeah.
even just that. And that is like kind of the only place where she really carries weight. Fine, whatever. I don't care. Like, I've never seen it. And watching it, I was like, oh my God. I've always, this is, I'm like, oh, is this way too much to say? But, watching somebody who has a feature that you have in a situation like that, I was like, I have always been afraid that like if I'm having sex and like what do I look like? Like I think that's normal when
Yeah.
you're like, oh, like from this angle you're seeing me like this, whatever, and like seeing somebody else in this like situation where it's not like pornographic or fetishizing
No.
or funny and comedic in some way. Because even Shrill, like, which it was so groundbreaking to see a fat person have sex, but it was like the point of that scene was like that the sex wasn't good in a lot of cases.
There is that time where Adie Bryant's character has sex with her best friend's brother, where she's writing
Yes,
him. That when I think of Shrill and
I
Sex,
forgot about that.
that scene, it was
Oh no, I think of the
revolutionary
boyfriend.
for me to see a fat woman on top of a man with back roll, like her back rolls hanging out and
Mm,
enjoying it. Both people having a good time. That was such a revolutionary thing to see,
but
and I
that's
think,
one. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, and to see Penelope, there's one angle that the director of that episode, Andrew On, um, shoots her at, where Colin is sort of on top of her. You can't really see you see the side of his face, and he's kissing up her neck, like really like alternating between her neck and the top of her breasts. And you see the full kind of double chin area, and it
Yeah, yeah.
isn't unattractive. He's clearly into it. She's into what's happening to her. It's really, really beautiful even. And I think, a lot of bigger women can relate to when you're wearing a bra, or in this case, a corset, and you're sitting down, they're in a carriage,
Mm,
all of, the weight, the underwire of either the bra or the corset pushes up. So when
yeah.
that pushes up, I'm trying to do it without demonstrating it. When
No.
it pushes up,
I'm like, I can do it.
you have more fat here, but then also
Yeah.
that combined with the fat here, and it could like seem kind of unattractive. And the way they did it was so well done. And also the fact that like they're so caught up in the moment that none of that matters too.
Yeah, and I think the audience is
Yeah.
too. And just the fact that it's like genuinely like tender and it's
Yeah.
like yeah, and it's a type of sexy that the scene from Shrill for me wasn't really, if that
Yeah.
makes sense, because it's so understated. But
And
then
I
there's
think
also,
continue.
I mean, I guess I haven't seen the other sex scenes, but she was fully clothed. And I do wonder in the other sex scenes, will there be fewer clothes? So we'll see about that. I'm sure there will be, right?
I don't know. Um, uh, I
Ah,
I see your point
screw
there,
Netflix for not giving me a
but
screener.
I'm gonna turn your words back on you. Okay,
Go for it.
turn your words back on you. You did say that there's always in the Bridgerton sex formula at the very beginning when they first start to have like some sort of sexual experience.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the time that is clothed.
It's true.
So that falls into the norm of what you were saying. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I will say that it's not because she's
Yeah,
fat that
yeah.
falls into what you were
No,
talking.
I don't think it is,
Okay.
but I'll be watching.
Yeah. Yeah. I think too, what's so wonderful about this season, like season one, I think took everybody off guard by how passionate it was. It was a very passionate, steamy, sexy romance. And then you have season two, which is more of a longing kind of love. and a lot of angst. And first, I didn't love season 2 as much as everybody, or actually, I think that's pretty common. Season 2 was more divisive among fans.
I loved season
Season
2.
season 3 is it's a sweet romance. And I think
Mhm.
when we hear the word sweet romance, we think of like something like, overly tender and like, sugary sweet. And I don't mean that at all. I mean that in a like you have friends to lovers kind of story. We see these characters for 2 seasons, one pining after the other, one not realizing what a dumbass he is. And you kind of have this, I think it's you see someone kind of come into himself, figure out who his feelings are, figure out what his feelings are, who he kind of wants to be, and how this other person fits into that. And I think for Colin, there's so much internal work that's going on that wouldn't have worked if we were just meeting one of these characters for the first time, like we do in a
Yeah.
Bridgerton season.
I mean, I think they were able to admit they loved each other much quicker than either of the other couples.
Right, right.
And
Yeah.
I think from what I can see, I suspect the tension going forward is going to be sort of outside forces rather than like within their relationship and their
Mhm.
communication as much.
Fair. I think that's fair. I think also too, if there would be I hate to like phrase it like this because it seems more crass, but like, the first 4 episodes is very Colin centric in terms of, he's kind of at fault here. He really effed things over and he's, leading Penelope in one direction and then kind of turns and spins her around when he realizes what he wants, right? The
Right.
second half
Well,
of the season, presumably there's this other thing going to be looming over their heads
mhm.
is Lady Whistledown. I don't think
Right.
it's presumptuous or spoiler of me to say
Well,
that
it's in the
because
preview.
it's in the preview. And then also, I mean, if you're gonna, it's a Chekhov's gun situation, right? If at the end
Totally.
of the first episode, you're gonna have Colin say, I hate Lady Whistledown, and you already know it's Penn, you know that that's coming at some point in the season.
Yeah. And it's much higher stakes than in the book even because
Oh, huge.
yeah.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
also in the book, and this is really important to point out too, is that there is a 10-year gap between the third book and
Yes,
the book,
we
which
should
is
talk about
Colin's
that.
series.
Mhm.
There's a 10-year gap, and they're in 2 very different places in life. In the book, Penelope's 28. In the show, she's I think like 20. Colin is well into his 30s in the books. Here he's like in his mid 20s. So they're at very different points in life. Penelope has been writing as Lady Whistledown for years at this point, over a decade. She's kind
Mhm.
of done with it. She's like sort of
Yeah.
I've done this thing for so long. I've done everything I can with it. So in the book, she's like willing to hang it up. Here, we don't know what's going to happen. We don't know
Yeah.
if she wants to continue, if she's willing to give it up for Colin. She does say when she's courting Debling, I want to court Debling because him leaving for so long would allow me the freedom to write as I.
Right. She's
So,
definitely a little girl bossy still.
yes. Yeah.
Yeah. She talks about her thriving business.
Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see going into the second part, like how Penelope reconciles with Whistledown and how that impacts Colin's reconciliation with it. So
Mhm.
my final question for you as we lead is what are you most looking forward to about part 2 besides the wait
Um,
being over?
besides the what?
The wait being over.
Honestly. Trying to find a way not to say the sex.
You can say the sex. I think that's really valid. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm looking forward to the sex. Okay.
Yeah.
I started watching Bridgerton. I literally it was like during like lockdown and Bridgerton came out and everyone was like, "Oh my God, it's so sexy." I was like, "This seems stupid. I hate Regency. I don't like historical drama, whatever." Like I never read any
Yeah.
Jane Austen or anything. And then everyone was like, "There, it's sexy." And so I was finally my boyfriend and I both were like, "All right, we'll just watch it for the sex."
Yeah.
And then I got really into it. So here we are.
Yeah. I
Yeah. No,
I
I'm really looking forward to seeing that because that was it's just like they always shoot them so beautifully. I am so excited to see stuff from the book come to life. Um, and
like
I'm
sex
also
stuff
really
from the book
excited.
or,
What?
or like sex stuff from the book or or other
Yeah,
stuff.
because there's like specific things
Yeah.
that are like, well, and other things too. And then the other thing that I'm really excited about is like the tension of who will of the Lady Whistledown reveal.
Right.
Um, yeah. But truly like I cannot, it's not even just like from like a gross perspective of being like, where's the sex? But like it's also because it again was so groundbreaking and I'd never seen a scene quite like that
Yeah.
with a body quite like that.
Yeah.
And I'm really, really excited to see how they go further.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's really, I mean, like you said, it's revolutionary, especially when, the Regency heroines that we get are your Keira Knightleys, your Anya Taylor-Joys, your
Totally, yeah.
super, super thin, which is not actually historically accurate because if you were
No.
super thin, the gentry didn't want you because it was an indication that you couldn't bear children, right? Like you wouldn't have been strong enough to bear children. So
Mhm.
anyway, um, it's really refreshing to see that. I'm really excited to see how these, you were talking about these external factors, right, of this love story. I'm
Mhm.
really excited to see how those resolve themselves, how the Lady Whistledown thing is handled, because, last season, everybody was caught up on the betrayal of Colin saying he would never court her. There is this major betrayal with Lady Whistledown that Penn has in terms of, and you can view it as a betrayal or not, like granted, I feel like everything
Of
she's,
her like calling Colin out.
well, calling out the Marina, which we didn't even get to talk about,
Right.
the Marina of
Oh
it all.
God.
Colin
Oh.
is very protective of Eloise. So like, there's a whole subplot in season 2 where Eloise is courting someone and that Penelope knows is going to harm Eloise's reputation eventually.
Mhm.
In order to save her from the queen, she brings Penelope writes about it in order to save her from the queen. Of course, nobody knows her reason why like the reasoning behind exposing her. But once that
Mhm.
is found out, Eloise feels betrayed, and that's why they're no longer friends this season. So like Colin, so I feel like those three things, right? Lady Whistledown has talked shit about Colin. She
Yeah.
ruined the his first proposal with Marina. She's talked shit about his sister. Like those are really, really big betrayals that kind of could loom over Penelope's head in part 2. I'm really excited to see where the other love story this season goes, which is really between Penelope and Eloise.
Mhm.
I think how we didn't talk about this, and I want to be able to finish up soon so we don't have to, but that love story I felt was so realistically told this season of like
Yeah.
being upset and knowing you can't be friends with someone, but still wanting the best and still looking out for them. And I think that was so realistically done.
Mhm.
I'm excited to see where their relationship goes. I don't understand why we can't get this all at one time. I think it's probably because there might be something in those final 2 episodes about, a certain upcoming season that we can't, I think there's probably like, I think Sophie's probably in the last 2 episodes.
Interesting.
Um, and they don't want to spoil that yet. I don't know why we
I'm
can't.
sure they just want to draw out the hype, you know?
It's probably capitalism, honestly.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, but Abby, thank you so much for talking with me today. I know it was very long-winded and drawn out, but I'm excited to talk about this. We have been waiting for 2 years for this story, so
I
there's a
know.
lot
This is
to talk about.
so incredible.
Yeah. Well, thank you for coming on. Guys, please go on to punchandcritics.com to read my review. I will link it if you're watching this on our website. I will link that there. You can find Abby on TikTok for the More Than Tracy Turnblad. Excuse me, the More Than Tracy Turnblad account. She also has a podcast herself, which I will probably be on in a few weeks to talk about part 2. So guys, I hope you have a great rest of your week. Go enjoy, watch Bridgerton, watch it a few times. I think it's better like the more you watch. Have a great weekend.
Thanks for checking out the show. If you like what we're laying down, please subscribe to our channel and click the bell to receive notifications for all of our latest stuff.